Gossi Adichie said, when we reject to single story, when we realize that there is never a single story about any place, we regain a kind of paradise. And often, Africa's story has been told from out of Africa. Democracies have involved long and conflicted processes in Europe that have taken years and decades to consolidate. We can approach democracy in Africa if we don't remember the processes of colonization and decolonization. We can approach democracy in Africa without considering cultural diversity like Nigeria's. We can approach democracy in Africa without recognizing the social conditions of a great part of the population and the existing social inequality. We can approach democracy in Africa without defending the fundamental need to fight for the rule of law and transparency. Despite setbacks, conflicts, and failed states, democracy in Africa is advancing. And despite everything, Africa's economy is growing like never before in history, and it needs a fair distribution. And we must praise the millions of Nigerians who are transforming Africa with training, creativity, and solidarity. If there is one country that is decisive for democracy's future in Africa, it's Nigeria, your country. Nigeria is the most populous country in Africa. Nigeria has the biggest economy in Africa. In 2020, Nigeria's economy will be among the 20 largest in the world. Nigeria and its religious, ethnic, and cultural diversity. Nigeria and its great energy resources. Nigeria and the challenge of violence and terror. We know that it's harder to achieve democracy in societies that are culturally diverse and have a religious divide between their populations. But we also know that only in democracy, with plurality, with religious liberty and neutrality from the state, can peacefully living together be guaranteed. But living together in peace demands a holding interreligious and intercultural dialogue. And what can unite a religious, diverse country with different ethnic groups and a great number of languages? Above all, democracy, rights, and political equality constitute the necessary cement to unite different people so they feel like equals. But democracy only advances if equality in rights advance. If we include people instead of marginalizing them. And history's most permanent outcasts have been women. And so, here today, let me declare very forcefully, we will only see progress in a country when the women of this country conquer their rights, their dignity, and their liberty. We know that in the world, 1 out of 3 women suffer gender-based violence. We know all this. We know the data. And the most odious, unbearable, and radical denial of women's liberty is violence, coercion, the intimidation which is imposed on them. It is a universal phenomenon. It concerns all continents and all cultures. We must speak out against criminal sexism at work, in the streets of our towns, in schools, in universities. It's a question of principles, of dignity. No faith, no political regime can justify discrimination against women. We must prevent violence and protect women with laws that fight against violence and with police force and use. We know that equality for women implies health, education, reproductive health, work, political participation, in conclusion, empowerment. If women achieve their role in society, then society will be fair and it will enhance education, health, and equality. And we aren't faced with an issue that has to do with economic assets, but with ethnical ones, with principles and values. In September, the post-2015 agenda will be defined, taking over from the Millennium Development Goals, and its first goal must be gender equality. It's a proposal with the women of Africa in mind, taking into account their labor and example. More than 5 centuries ago, the writer Christine de Pizan wrote, "If women had written the books, I am sure we would have done it a different way, because we know that we are being wrongly accused. And books will leave us stories here in Port Harcourt, the World Book Capital, 2014, a magnificent initiative for children and young people, an initiative that recognizes Nigerian culture and must serve as a way to extend knowledge and training. Looking after schools and classrooms is looking after a country. Looking after the teachers is to believe in the country, peace, women's rights, and education. These are the 3 pillars to achieve a decisive change to build a good democracy. Education is first of all human rights, a universal right. It goes beyond a specific culture, a religion, or a singular tradition. Education is what distinguishes us as human beings, and that is why the war against education is an abomination. We must therefore increase all the efforts to have safe schools in the most insecure regions. We must therefore accelerate the process to end illiteracy and prolong obligatory school attendance and educate the children to create good citizens. Investment in education is the most worthwhile cause. Education changes the lives of people and countries. Energy resources don't last forever. A good education system will always be a country's best energy. Africa's future is the future of education, and Nigeria's future is the future of education. Nigeria is growing strong, and it can reach its goal of being the 20th economy worldwide by 2020. It's a great emerging country, but I consider that it must focus its efforts in 2 great directions. Firstly, diversifying its economy. Secondly, redistributing wealth. Because, apart from some exceptions, it seems clear that countries with great stock of fossil fuels tend to concentrate their income through taxation